duty, honor, country dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
The destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals.
Now, we are the masters of our fate.
Howdy, gents. Welcome back to another episode of the Wolf and Iron podcast. I'm your host, Mike Yarbrough, founder and curator of wolfandiron.com, and I'm glad you're here. Fellas, we've got a fine episode today. It's a conversation with my pal, Warren Peterson. What I liked about this discussion is that it's very genuine, and that really defines a lot of things that I admire about Warren. He just puts it all out there, and he's the guy that's had the ups, he's had the downs, and he's taking those things and he's using his experience to help men lead better lives. And he's doing that through his site, significantman.com. He's also the author of Becoming a Significant Man. And he's going to join us today, and we're going to talk about some of his journey. We're going to talk about some things in the book and really talk about how you can become a guy who's leading a life of significance. But before we jump into this episode, let me encourage you to do one thing. You guys know that I'm on mission here with Wolf and Iron, and it requires a lot of action on my part. And if you guys are on mission with me, here's one thing that you can do that would be really helpful. Go out and leave a review. This episode alone will get several thousand downloads. We get many thousand downloads a month. And to kind of give you an idea of the infrequency of reviews that we get, there are about 16 reviews right now out on iTunes for us. 16. Okay. And one of those is mine. So I've not done a good job about encouraging you guys to go out and leave a review, but that's going to change. It just takes a few minutes. If you're on your mobile app, you can do it while you're listening to the podcast. Please leave a review. Look, it's a great way to help other guys out, to get this podcast in front of the guys that need to hear it. Thanks. Now, here's Warren Peterson. Mr. Warren Peterson, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right, so I'm really excited to have this conversation with you because you're sort of in the same vein of solving the problem out there that I am, and that is we see men who have fallen short of what they're called to be, and we want to help them to be the kind of men that they really ought to be. And so we're taking to social media to do that, and many other routes to try and get them to change. But really, it's an inspirational kind of work that we're trying to do out there. So I'm always excited to talk to guys who are in that same area of battle, if you will, that I am. And so I think this will be a good conversation. But for the guys who are just listening to this, maybe just getting to know us, getting to know you, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where you're at now in life, and maybe how you got to the significant man.
Sure. Yeah, it's kind of a fun story. I'll try and do it in the short version for what we're doing here versus the hour-long biography. But I'm married, have 4 kids, currently living in Colorado. About 5 years ago, chatting with my wife, we had been both born and raised in Chicagoland area, and we decided we were done with Chicago. We were done with the Midwest, done with the winters, and we just kind of laid out the map and said, where do we want to live? Where do we want to raise our family? We always loved the mountains, and we just kind of started looking at places and ended up here in Colorado. One of the things I talk about a lot is that we have the power to choose our own life and the path that we want it to be on. And I try to live that example myself. I didn't want to live in Illinois anymore, wanted to live in the mountains. We packed up and moved to the mountains. It was a bit scary because we didn't know anyone out here. We had no context. We just wanted to change where the family was and live in the mountains. So we did that. I started in the world of entrepreneurial stuff when I was a teenager. That's always been my thing, and enjoyed in that. And my first, what I would call real business, was something I ran for about 12 years. It was a company involved in IT and network security, and I learned an awful lot of stuff there, had a lot of great lessons, built up a nice big company, had partnerships all over the globe, had offices in Chicago, office in London, office in Singapore, and that was quite an interesting experience to grow and build a nice big company like that, which then crashed entirely. So I got to learn the other side of the equation as well, what's it like to build up something big and have it crash all around you. Went through that experience, which may come up later in our conversation, but to kind of keep the timeline moving along here. Then out here in Colorado, looking at what are the things that I want to do with my life. And what I decided here was that my calling is really to work with and help other men. And a lot of those very negative and painful experiences that I had gone through are great assets now. You know, I've been asked before, have I personally experienced depression? I have, and it sucks. And I never would have understood it had I not. I would have known the book theory, but not the real truth of what it's like to truly struggle to get out of bed in the morning. I would have understood when men say I've lost everything, but not the same as how I can understand it having experienced it. We lost every penny of our family savings. We lost our house, which my wife and I literally built with our hands. I like doing that stuff. So we lost a home that we had built for ourselves, lost everything, and went through the process of recovering and building all that back, and never would have been able to comprehend really what guys are going through who are dealing with those issues had I not had that myself. So had those dark, long times. And after that was all done and over, coming back out of that darkness, so to speak, into the light. And that's one of the things that I had learned through that experience is how to work and help other men. And that kind of grew from there into the work that I do now.
So do you think that you had a mindset of, I want to live a life of significance. I don't want this to be the end of my story, when the company comes crashing down. Did you have that prior to, the crap hitting the fan, or did you have that afterwards?
Primarily after.
Okay.
Beforehand, I would say I'm like the regular guy chasing after success and chasing after, how do I get the big house? How do I get the good car? How do I have a quote unquote big real business that I can run that's my own? And, I had all that stuff, and, was at the moment very proud of what I had, very prideful of the things that I had built and had created. But that was the driver then. Now on the dad side, I've always been very active parenting. So one of the other lessons that I learned out of that is I was also that guy who burned 80 to 100 to 120 hours a week trying to make all that success stuff happen.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And
so, I would spend as much time as I could with the kids outside of that. Mm-hmm. We also were a homeschool family. So, I would do science lessons and stuff like that in between working. But, there was one time during that process where I worked for, it was a 9-month stretch where I worked a minimum of 14 hours a day every day. And at the time, I was wearing that like a badge of honor. I missed birthday parties, I missed family gatherings and events because I had to work. I had to prove how much I was dedicated to working and proving that I was going to be successful. And even to the area to the point where I had a little cot in my office.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
And I slept there because I couldn't take the time to drive home and back.
Wow.
Not all the time, of course, but there were definitely times where it was where I'd spend maybe a week where I literally lived at the office.
Jeez.
And, in my mind, I thought I was doing it right.
Yeah.
Because I had all this stuff. So, I must have been doing it right.
Well, we homeschool too. I mentioned that before we started the podcast, but it's, I think, when you're the guy who's bringing home the bacon, and I'm assuming that your wife doesn't work because you homeschool, but if it's just you bringing home the bacon, there is that sort of added pressure to, if I don't have my stuff right, then, this could all come crashing down. My main role is really to provide for my family. That's what it feels like a lot of times. And, and I know that's how we measure our success a lot of times as well. And so I definitely feel that pressure. Obviously, it's not a homeschool only thing because this happens. This is just guys are driven like this in general.
Certainly.
But I think it's even more pressure when you feel like, man, I'm the guy that's responsible for this one thing in my family, and that's making the money. And so I think we tend to feel more of that as well. If you could go back to yourself back then, like I'm thinking like sort of a Scrooge type of thing, like where the ghosts come in at night.
Sure.
And you're sleeping on the cot and in your office, and like older Warren can come in and like wake your younger self up. What would you say to yourself then? Like what do you think would actually shake you awake and say like, dude, this is not the right thing you need to be doing right now?
That's pretty tough, to be honest, because when I was in that mindset, I thought I was doing everything right. So it would be pretty hard for me to come in and tell me I'm not doing it right. Mm-hmm. Now, if I had the ability of Christmas Carol, and I could take myself to the future and see myself
right.
as that broken man who lost everything because of how I was pushing,
right.
that would hit home. But just there's a toughness there in getting that message through. I deal with that with some of the guys that tell me they're on the right track. Yeah. I can see they're not, but they think they are. And when you're there and you're focused and you're doing what you think you're supposed to be doing, it's very tough to get off that message, to be honest. We can say things, but to a degree, it's almost like when we were teenagers and our mom or dad might tell us something. And,
right.
Of course, we know everything on the planet, so
sure.
we're not going to listen to mom and dad at that point. So it's kind of a little like that. If I could see what I had done, if I could see the fact that I lost everything, and the fact, there was a time there where, I'm hiding my vehicle so that it doesn't get repossessed.
Wow.
If I could see the things that I actually had to deal with because of how I had screwed things up, that would obviously, that would rock me.
Yeah. Well,
but just in terms of words, it's tough.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And I think that's a good lesson for a lot of the guys that are listening to this, because no doubt there's somebody listening to this podcast right now and they're going, no, that's not me. I'm not in Warren's place. I'm not quite that bad.
Yep.
I got to work the 60, 70, 80 hours because, if I don't, I'll get fired and then I'll lose everything. Look, man, to the guy who's listening to this, you need to take an honest evaluation of yourself and make sure that, that you really are on the path you want to be on, that it's going to lead to the things you want. Because there's, I didn't have an issue. I didn't have an event in my life like you did, Warren, but I remember when my kids were really young, actually our firstborn was really young, I was going to school and I was working at the same time. And it was just the entire day was just a blur. And because of that, his entire childhood as a baby and so on is sort of a blur to me. At the same time, you can recognize, okay, this is going to be for a season. That's one thing. But if you're setting up yourself to have that this is my lifestyle and I'm not going to change, and there's no, I'm not looking to get out of this at some point. I think that's when guys need to say, whoa, look, there's going to be things I miss and there's going to be time I can't get back. Time to put the brakes on life a little bit and focus on what's important. Yeah.
And I would agree with that, as it is our job to provide. That's one of the core things that we feel in our gut. And if there is, as you said, if there's a season where that means you're working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, then you do it. You do what you have to do to provide. But I agree also that if that becomes part of your identity, if that becomes part of how you define yourself, if that becomes who you are, then you need to really step back, because you've gone from, well, I need to do this for a season, to self-identifying as that kind of a man.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So one of the things I like about what you're doing is the name, Significant Man. And so I wanted to dive in a little bit about what that means to you. Like, where did that,
Sure.
How did you come up with that name?
Sure.
And what does it mean to be significant?
Sure. Well, it's tied into where our conversation actually started. When I was going through the process of, well, what do I want to call this work that I'm doing now? My first and kind of gut reaction was to successful, successful man, and then I realized that's not really the message I'm trying to make here, because that's what I used to drive for, and I think there are a lot of guys who would consider themselves successful who would not consider their lives necessarily significant. And so it is different. It's a little bit of a transition in that, the way that we, especially in Western culture, define success is by our stuff, it's by our toys. How much money do we have?
Sure.
The trend now for guys, what watches do you have? That sort of stuff. That's how we define success. But you could have none of that and be significant.
Mm-hmm.
So there isn't actually a direct correlation between what we tend to think of as success and what we think of as significant. And the significance was much more attractive to me. That was more of the draw to me. That's the kind of, when I'm dead and gone, I'm hoping that I will have done the right work necessary to build a legacy that lasts and to have been significant in this world.
Mm.
The stuff's gone, right? We all know we don't take any of the stuff with us. And we might be able to will it to somebody, but we have no idea what they're going to do with that when we're gone. So the stuff is totally irrelevant at the end of our lives. But if we've been able to build the correct relationships with other people, if we've been able to have positive impacts on people's lives, it starts at home with our wives, our kids, brothers, sisters, mom, dad, that's where it all begins, is in our relationships at home and with those that we are directly able to influence every single day. But, then it even goes beyond that. How do you, as a man, how do you treat other people in the world? If you go to the same gas station every day, does the cashier cringe when you come in or look forward to when you come in?
Right.
Little teeny things like that. And that has nothing to do with monetary wealth. It has nothing to do with the way we look at success, but it has everything to do with how you're living your life.
Yeah. Well, let me try to unpack that a little bit, because when I think about being significant, right? If I think about being successful, it's kind of like you said. I can say, well, I'm successful because I have this much money in the bank. I wear these kind of clothes. I have this kind of watch, car, what have you. At lifestyle type of things. So there's sort of a way to measure it. Is significance, is that measured by the impact that you're having on others and the number of people that you're impacting? Or could you be just as significant if you're having an impact, only on your children or only on your family?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can make the argument that those folks, your kids, your wife, your immediate family, that's more important than everyone else. Now, in the ideal world, you're having that sort of positive impact everywhere that you're interacting with people, and you're building strong relationships, and that's, every place. But it definitely starts at home, and it has the biggest impact at home because, we can, for those of us who had the opportunity to know our grandparents or even potentially great-grandparents, we have those stories, and we can say, this is how my dad impacted me. This is how my grandfather impacted me. This is how my great-grandfather impacted me. We're able to say those sorts of things. Those stories are different. They have different levels of relevance, different amount of power in who we are as you get out of extended family. So if there's a man who is doing, for example, a career that he can't stand, which is certainly common in the United States, he's involved in a career that he can't stand. He might have coworkers and management that he has a very confrontational relationship with. So they're not friends. They're not going to hang out on Friday night. They go to work and they leave. They don't see each other anymore. Mm-hmm. He can still choose how he's living his life around them. He can still be respectful, even if it's not returned. He can still be kind, even if it's not returned. And obviously that's a challenge, right? If you have people that are getting in your face all the time, it's tough to be kind and be respectful. But that's one way you can do it. But even for that man in that situation, if he goes home at night and he's teaching his son's daughter, if he's teaching his kids how to grow up and be good people, if he's teaching his kids, if he's instilling in them strong values, strong morals, if he's letting them know what does it mean to be a good father, what does it mean to be a good husband, setting an example for them to see that. So he treats their mom with love, with kindness, with respect. all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
That man will have lived a significant life, because his impact will last for generations.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really good. And, as you were kind of describing that, one of the things I was thinking about is a tendency of mine and probably guys who are in a position like we are where we can impact a number of people that we don't know personally, right? Mm-hmm. Is that sometimes we try to tie our success and our significance together. If I'm thinking about probably a more common example might be like a professor at a college. And he's successful because he's a professor, but he also wants to be successful in his significance. He wants to publish papers throughout the year that are well received. He wants to invent things, or he wants to push ideas onto the larger community. He wants to be the guy that's talking in front of large crowds of people, or what have you. And I think a lot of times we can sort of say our success is also related to our significance. And I think we can do this in a bad way, just like we can do it with success alone. But I think sometimes we can put ourselves in a position as influencers to say, I'm going to judge my success based on my significance. And we end up falling into the same trap, or we can, as the guy who's just pursuing success for the sake of, money and what have you. Preachers can do this, right? We see the mega churches out there that are, going crazy. The guy's making millions of dollars a year, and he's, basically a rock star type of thing. But he feels significant, but he's also very successful. And I think we can still, if we're not careful, if we don't really hone in what it means to be significant in our lives, I think we can fall into that trap of trying to pursue success through significance.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And at that particular point, you're just trading your type of success, instead of the type of success that you're after being dollars, or being a Ferrari, or being whatever. Then the type of success that you're after is adoration of a lot of people. The type of success that you're after is feeling good because you got a certain number of likes on a post, or you got a certain number of shares. You're after that. And if you're chasing it because of any of those sorts of reasons, you've kind of missed the mark.
Yeah, I agree. Yep. And I'm kind of saving this for my own self so I can listen to this again and again. So as a reminder, Mike, you're not chasing success. You want to be significant. Well,
don't get me. Well, I want to make a quick point on that, though. Yeah. Not to get off the tangent, though. There's nothing wrong with success, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes people tend to take this and somehow flip it around the other way and say, well, the only way that I can be significant then is if I live my life like Mother Teresa. I have barely no possessions. I have pretty much nothing in the material world that's mine. That's not something that I would suggest at all. I mean, the nice things in life, the luxuries in life, the great things in life, they're awesome. So there's nothing wrong with having that, as long as it doesn't become the focus, as long as the driver isn't the accumulation of this stuff, to your church example, though, as long as the driver isn't the number of people that are in attendance, or getting the correct amen at the correct moment that you're wanting that from the crowd, that sort of thing. So, I love all that stuff. I'm never gonna be able to flip off of that side entirely. Yeah. Having the great things in life is part of being alive at this time in the world in the West. So it's just those are great aspects of life. So I just want to make sure that, we didn't touch on that, but there's nothing wrong with having any of those things as long as they're not the driver. Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for clarifying that point. And I knew you and I were in sync on that, but that saves me from getting a lot of emails from guys. So appreciate that. Well, me too. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if a guy wants to work hard and go get a Ferrari, do it, dude. I mean, have at it. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Exactly.
Yep. All right. So, we'll talk about rabbit trails here. Here's one we could get off on pretty well. Where are guys missing the mark these days? What are the things that men are doing wrong that we can just kind of sit back and go, nope, that's not where you should be. That's not, we kind of talked about success and stuff. There's some other areas on your mind where you wish you could just coach guys in?
Yeah, there's many. So I'll try. Maybe one of the ones that will touch the most people or make sense maybe to the most people is far too many guys tie their identity as a man to their career.
Huh.
So they are their job. And when you're asking a guy, tell me about you. The first thing that we tend to do as men is start with our vocation.
Mm-hmm.
So I meet Joe Blow on the street. Hey Joe, tell me about you. I'm an accountant. He'll start with whatever his career happens to be. And obviously, as men, what we do to provide for our families that's a big driver. That's part of who we are. But too often for guys, that becomes literally who we are.
Yeah.
And that's a big danger, because in the event that career goes away, and unless you are completely in control of every aspect of your life, and you have $100 million trust fund to fall back on in case of hard times, in case of other than that one guy that fits that particular mold, odds are something's going to happen to your career during your life. And if you made your career your identity, if you combined those so tightly like so many men do, what happens then is if you lose your job, you actually just lost a big part of who you are. You lost part of your identity. And as men, that's a very dangerous thing for us. That gets us into the territory of then saying, who am I? What is this all for? What is this life even about? I'm no longer an accountant. I can't make any money. What's the point of everything? And so we so intrinsically tie those two together that inevitably when the bad thing happens or when the change in life happens and we no longer have that career, it just cuts a part of us out.
Yeah.
And if we're not prepared for that, it's devastating.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's absolutely right. And, it is right that we, as men, we do tie ourselves naturally to what we do. We work very hard to become skilled in a certain thing. We feel good at doing that thing, and so we do very much tie our identity to it. I think it also keeps us from feeling like we can think outside the box. Even in our circle of friends, but certainly within our profession. That we want to be able to be the people who that doesn't think like everybody else, right? I'm in the software development field as well, so I write software and that kind of stuff. And so there's a certain kind of look and a certain kind of vibe that goes along with that. Me in flannels and jeans and boots or whatever doesn't always line up with that, but still there's a certain kind of way that people go about, right? But I've always found that the people who don't see themselves as being tied to that one specific thing, they're the people a lot of times that are coming up with the awesome ideas. It tends to be people who are, woodworkers or musicians or something like that, right? Or they love to rock climb or whatever the case is, and they want to go, and that's, they do work as a developer or what have you, but they've got all these other passions that they're about as well. And so they do see themselves as kind of a very well-rounded individual, mixing in with a lot of different things. And they also identify themselves as a husband, as a father, as a Christian, as a whatever. And those types of things, it's like you said, if one piece of their identity gets pulled away, it's not the whole world doesn't come crashing down on them. Yeah. So that's absolutely right that you said that. That guys, we do get tied into that. So, one of the things I was thinking about, and it sort of ties into what you were just saying, when somebody's feeling significant and feeling successful in their life, they feel like they're doing all the right things, and then the rug just gets pulled out from under them, like happened to you, right? And everything starts coming crashing down. Their wife wants a divorce, or their kids hate them, or some terrible thing happens, and basically life just kicks them in the nuts. How do they get back that sense of, I'm on the right track, I'm living a significant life? Yeah,
well, that is a toughie, and I would suggest that there are steps in between. So if you're at that point where you're going through the lowest part of your life, it's a little unrealistic to say I'm going to just flip the switch, so to speak. And I know you didn't say that. I'm metaphorically, saying here, it's unrealistic to think you're going to do this one thing or take this one action, have this one thing happen in your life, and you'll be back. It takes time. If if you've harmed that relationship between you and your wife, it's going to take time to get it back. If you have gotten in a position where your kids don't know you, that's something else I hear a lot from guys.
Right.
They're like, I've got kids, but they don't really know who I am.
Mm.
We maybe play a little bit now and then, but they couldn't really tell you anything about me. I don't really know anything about them. That takes time. It'll actually heal faster with the kids if they're younger.
Yeah.
Because they're naturally more forgiving. They're naturally more open to that. If the kids are teenager years or above, that's going to take a lot of time too. Because, you may have spent your whole life breaking that relationship, and it just happened, piece by piece by piece, and you didn't see it until it actually snapped. And well, you can't just put that back together. So the ways there are to focus first and foremost on yourself. And I don't mean that kind of in the ego way that it might sound, but that's what's necessary. A lot of times what happens, especially in relationships with wives, is as it's going downhill, the guy's putting more and more of it on her.
Yeah.
And she doesn't like that. She doesn't want that. He tends to try harder, to try more, and it's like, this didn't work. I got to try this. This didn't work. What do you want, honey? What should I be doing here? Just tell me and I'll do it. That sort of thing. And, that's going to take time to flip around, but he does that by saying, okay, I'm going to fix me. It's not her fault. It's mine. Yeah. It's not the kid's fault. It's mine. It's not my boss's fault or anything else. It's mine. I'm the one who got me in the position that I'm in. So the first step is a guy being willing to honestly admit that point. Not kind of like in the false humility way that people do it sometimes, or, people post on social media, I'm feeling bad, just because they want people to say, what's wrong? Not any of that, but honestly say, you know what? I really messed this up. I screwed everything up. It's me. Now, of course, the reality is blame has to go around. We all know the phrase, it takes two to tango, and that's true, but there's still somebody leading when you're dancing.
Right.
And so you kind of do I'm going to man up. I'm going to own this responsibility. I'm going to own the reality of my life right now. And it's up to me. I'm the one who broke it. I'm the one who's going to fix it. So the very first step is being willing to do that and do it with honesty. And that's a big one. We can, say it here in a short couple minutes of our conversation, but it might take guys months, possibly even years to get to that point, to acknowledge that reality and realize they're the ones in control of their life. Yeah.
No, I absolutely agree. And it's a significant event. I counsel with some guys sometimes, and, inevitably you will have certain guys who come in and it's all their wife's fault. It's their boss's fault. All the stuff you said, right? It's everybody else's fault but their own. And they cannot see it. Even if you say, look, man, no, it's your fault. They got excuses like crazy. But you have some guys that come in, and there's some guys, like you said, that just take time to get there, and they will eventually realize. But when that event happens, when the light comes on in a guy and he says, it's me. I'm the one that's broken. I'm the one that's screwing this stuff up. I may not be the only one, but at least I'm a big part of it, and I'm going to work on fixing myself. And hopefully, everybody else will be willing to work with me to put either my marriage back together or maybe my career back together or what have you.
Right.
It's tremendous. And because when that happens, that guy is going to be successful as long as he keeps that in front of himself, as long as he realizes that, the only one in these issues that's surrounding him that he can change is himself. And we've all got room to grow. So that's really good.
And it's a really powerful reality. That's one of the things that I like to chat about with guys on that is we tend to get drawn to the power ideas. Even when we say there's something powerful, our ears kind of peak up a little at it. But
Right.
when you realize you're the one in control of your life, that's powerful.
Yeah.
There's a lot there. It's intimidating. And it can be a little overwhelming because suddenly you have to accept the responsibility for the outcome.
Yeah.
But you realize that you have power there, and you can choose to use that power if you want to. And so, it's a powerful reality when you do cross that line and you realize, I'm the one in charge of my life. This is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it can be a significant weight of responsibility, but then you also have the realization that we're responsible for how we feel about that responsibility. Do we take it all on and say, I'm going to conquer the world? Or do we, trust in our brothers to help us out? Do we trust in God to give us some guidance? Do we trust in time for ourselves to mature? Do we see the light at the end of the tunnel type of thing? Or do we just say it's all black and it's all, terrible right now? And so that's another area where a lot of guys don't realize that you might be pissed off at your wife. You actually have the ability to change how you feel about your wife. It's not necessarily going to be instant, but you are in control of your emotions. And so I think, a lot of guys, when they hear what you're saying about my life is my responsibility, they're saying, yeah, I understand. And from that, they feel a tremendous weight. And I think also we've got to realize that we have a responsibility for how we carry that load. So just throwing that out there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. And, and one point in what you mentioned there, they might be really pissed off, and might be saying, this is my wife's fault or whatever. One of the things to realize as you go through this is you might be right.
That's right.
It might be like I'm not implying here that the man always does wrong and the woman always does right. Mm-hmm. Not at all. You might be doing whatever you think you can be doing to do the right in the right time, and she might be doing something that she knows is wrong. Maybe she's just personally trying to push your buttons. Maybe she's trying to see how are you going to react to this time. Mm-hmm. And you might be right. Maybe this thing that happened, you feel like, what? That was her fault. Oh, okay. So what?
That's right.
You still choose how you're going to respond to that. Yeah. You're always in charge of how you respond. No matter what happens to you, no matter what somebody does to you, whether it's justified or unjustified, you're the one in charge of how you respond.
Yeah, that's good. Good. I want to jump into some of the book stuff. So you were kind enough a while back to talk to me a little bit about your experience writing books. You've written a number of books. You've written a book that's going to be coming out soon called Becoming a Significant Man. And so we'll talk about that. I wanted to talk a little bit about just some of your experience in writing books in the past, because you have done a number. And so just tell us a little bit about how you got into that.
Sure. So for everyone who's listening, the books in the past are probably of zero interest to any of you. Those are books that I wrote starting in the late 90s and in the 2000s about computer and network security stuff. Big, giant books. All of them are, about 500 or 600 pages, all technical books filled with, how to do this and that on networks. And it was a great learning experience to learn how to properly design and create books that are meant to be teaching people something.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a lot of my heart in there. There wasn't a lot of my passion in there. It just happened to be something that I was good at, and that was one of my roles in the company, was as the lead author for the books that we had. So I actually wrote a dozen books like that.
Jeez.
Big giant books over the years.
Wow.
And I've always loved writing, and that's one of those things where if I were to be the proverbial pretend you don't have to do anything for anyone and you don't need to earn a penny of income in any way, what do you do?
Yeah.
I sit in the cabin in the mountains and I write.
Wow. Yeah.
And I have a workshop, and I make tables and chairs and things like that. That's the kind of stuff that I enjoy doing. So I really like writing. I've always liked writing. And I decided that as I'm doing this work here, I want to do a book. And there's a billion books out there on all sorts of subjects. So at the beginning, I was kind of thinking, well, who needs another book for men? Right. There's plenty of them out there, but there's always a need for more. There needs to be more men doing the work that you're doing. There needs to be more. There's never going to be enough. We need to get more men going on the right path in their life. So I started sitting down and writing, and my first decision was, am I going to write a book that's basically like one theme, mm-hmm. and it's reinforced and built up, which is relatively common, for nonfiction kind of books. And I decided not to do that with this book. I decided instead to write a bunch of really short chapters. So the book is not a giant book, but it has 60 chapters. And each chapter is just a couple pages long. So that way a guy can, read it for a couple minutes one night and be done with a chapter. And doesn't have to make a big time commitment. You can flip around throughout the whole book. It doesn't have to be read in any particular order. So that was kind of a couple of the things that I was thinking of if I wrote this, and if I was reading a book for me, basically,
yeah,
what would I want? I'm like, I would try that, because I have other books that take the one theme and build it over 300 pages, and instead I thought this might be worth it, and so it's a bunch of really short pieces, and that helped me with the writing process because I could sit down and I could write a chapter in a night.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to worry about, am I gonna kind of pick up where I left off? Am I gonna lose momentum as I'm going through? And it also helped because in that format, I had to stop because I had so many chapters.
Sure.
When it's like that, virtually everything that we can think of you can make a point in a couple pages that has relevance to your reader. So, it wasn't hard to write in that context. It was relatively straightforward, and then reached out to the publisher, went through the process of approval and having them, vet it and decide they wanted it. And now finally, quite a ways later, it's about to hit the bookstores all over the world.
Man, that's great. That's great. Well, you've not only have you written 12 other boring books, but which is an accomplishment of itself. All jokes aside, that's pretty impressive.
Yep.
But you finished another book that's also significant, and so you're well beyond what most guys, right? I'm still in the want to be an author phase, right, where I'm still working on my first book and that kind of stuff. But so I love talking to guys who are past that point and are getting their stuff out there. That's really cool. Is there anything like when you're writing, or maybe like one of the chapters you could pick out that you're like, this would be a great example of just something that I put in the book that maybe guys wouldn't expect, right? Because they're like you said, it's not one theme all the way through. Is there anything that comes to mind
that guys wouldn't expect? I'm not sure. I think most. So for most men who are wanting to read a book that is about becoming better, there probably aren't surprises in there.
Okay.
If there were an area, I'm a Christian, and my faith comes out in the book, but it's not a Christian per se book.
Sure.
It's not filled with Bible verses. It's not filled with scripture. It's not doing any sort of a Bible study or anything like that. So I would think that maybe a couple of the chapters that I have in there that are related to faith, related to religion, might give different perspectives. I'm hoping.
Yeah.
There are a lot of it's not written, in other words, for the quote unquote religious guys.
Yeah.
They might not like it. If the guys are truly religious book readers, I don't know if they'll particularly care for this. It's written for guys who aren't. It's written for guys who have a lot of questions, for guys who want to become better. Better, like I actually literally have on the cover of the book is better husband, better father, better leader.
Yeah.
So it's for guys that want to do that. Guys who are willing to think about issues a little bit differently, who are willing to go into subjects and topics they might not have been willing to do before. Mm-hmm. Just like the discussion we had about, accept responsibility for your own life.
Right.
That's a pretty big one. And, if a guy's willing to do that, then he's already way ahead of most other men. So, maybe a couple of the ones, like, I have, as an example, I have one chapter that's called A Room Full of Women, and all it's about is women dragging their husbands to church and the husband not wanting to be there. Right. So there's a couple chapters in there related to faith and that sort of thing. But overall, I don't think too much in terms of surprises. What I hope is it's presented in a way that will give them new things to think about, I ask a lot of questions in the book for the readers to be thinking about, and hopefully they will. Hopefully they'll take the time to think about those, because I truly do feel that if you go through this whole book and you really think about these and you make some changes in your life, you really will come out different on the other side.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I like the approach to the book as well, the small chapters and stuff like that, because it kind of hits you with something different every day, and you don't necessarily know what you're getting. Even by, the title of A Room Full of Women, I wouldn't know what that's about, so I would read it just because I'm curious as what's this chapter going to be about today, right? And I think sometimes it's sort of like getting flanked by an enemy, where we don't know what to expect, and some goodness comes out of, at us in a way that we're not prepared for. And sometimes it kind of penetrates our shields, in ways that a very straightforward book with a very straightforward topic doesn't always do. So I think that's good.
Good. Thanks.
Yeah. I can't wait to check it out, man.
Good.
Well, let's close this up, man. I wanted to find out what it's meant to you to kind of be on this journey now where you're having an impact on other guys. You've got some YouTube videos out there that are great. You're doing, the book we just talked about. But what has it meant to you as a man to be doing this and being significant in this kind of way?
It's so fulfilling. I don't even know if I have the right words for it. As I had mentioned earlier, I had gone down the path of chasing after success, and that did not lead to the place I thought it would. And every time I have a conversation with a man, every time I can work with a couple guys in a group, it doesn't even matter the context. That moment of helping him through whatever that issue is, or if I'm not helping him through an issue, helping him to see things differently, knowing that not only is his life better, but his relationship with his wife is going to be better, his relationship with his kids is going to be better. Hopefully I've given him some ideas on God and on faith that maybe he hadn't thought of before, and that will get deeper and better. There's just nothing like it. I can't believe that this is something that I get to do. It never would have occurred to me in a million years longer ago that this is the path that I would be on. And it's so fulfilling. It's so awesome just to, there are times I get on the phone with guys. Maybe this isn't a good selling point for a podcast for guys, but, times I get on the phone with a guy and he's crying and I'm crying just because of how awesome things are going. Yeah. Or the flip side, he's on the edge of deep depression, and we're working our way out of it. And, I'm not a counselor. I don't claim to be. I'm not a therapist. I don't claim to be. But just being a leader and a mentor to somebody else who's going through that, it's just awesome.
Yeah. Well, look, man, it's been great to talk to you. I look forward to seeing your significant man grow, and I look forward to reading the book as well. I'm really thankful to have guys like you out there helping other fellas out and helping them to lead a significant life. So thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thanks, you too. Thanks a lot.
All right, Warren. Well, there you have it, men. I'd love to know what you thought about the episode. Feel free to reach out to me on any of my social networks. Also, don't forget to leave us a review at iTunes. You can do that by going to wolfandiron.com/iTunes or from your mobile device. Until next time, keep your powder dry, and may a fair wind be always in your sails.